Imagine this, the day after the real proof drops. Not rumors or flight logs, but undeniable footage of world leaders doing hideous, unmentionable things to children. The world reacts with horror. Governments crumble. Markets collapse. Chaos spreads. Why? Because when power is suddenly removed without a plan, a vacuum forms, and nature abhors a vacuum. Now imagine you hold that proof, evidence implicating presidents, billionaires, architects of global control. You could release it, or you could use it to force them to surrender, dismantle their networks, and retreat without war. That's not corruption, that's leverage. And leverage is how you remove power without triggering collapse. To the doubters who say Trump is on the list, ask yourself, if that were true, why did they deploy everything to stop him? Lawfare, fake investigations, a CIA-signed Russia hoax, even attempts on his life. If they had the leverage on Trump, they would have used it already. But they haven't, because they don't. I wish Trump didn't have to lie. I wish there were another way. Maybe this bizarre, out of sync with MAGA behavior is the wink and the nod. Maybe acting out of character is the message. This isn't about feelings. It's not about outrage or hashtags. It's about power and how it's strategically neutralized. You don't take down the Illuminati or New World Order with a lawsuit. You do it with leverage. Silent, invisible, world-shaping leverage. My friends, we are all anonymous, and welcome to the real world.
Dr. Marks here. I'm the gentleman that was on the Sean Ryan podcast that talked about pedophilia and explained how their networks is coming from someone who, one, hunts pedophiles and protects children through our task force. This is the reality that I want people to understand. And the reason why the Epstein list will not come out, like I've said from the beginning, is because it is an intelligence operation. The best form of currency right now for control and power in our world is videos or pictures of children being abused by certain adults. When you have those as leverage, you can control a person to make decisions that will shape nations and truly make the difference in both political, legal, business, and world economics. The moment you prosecute a pedophile that would be on that list, you lose the leverage on them, and you also risk them telling the rest of the story.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha with Tabs on Tap. I hope you guys all had a fantastic weekend. I can't believe it's Monday already. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Karen. Good to see you all this morning. I don't know what you thought about that video, coming into the show. How many of you heard it? Maybe I'll play it again at the end of the show. I don't really know if it matters, quite honestly, but we're going to talk about that today. A lot going on this weekend, a lot of talk about the Epstein files, and a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. I will tell you that for sure. This weekend I was pretty busy, but I was also going through the news thinking, what is happening? What's happening? It's really hard to hold the line. It is. It's really hard to trust the process. We have no choice, of course, but it's not easy to do. And we're going to talk about that today. Lots of other things to talk about. I'm very curious what all of you did over your weekend. It's a longer weekend for me. I don't have to work today, believe it or not, which is very rare for me. And so I feel like today's my weekend. I don't even know what I'm going to do with my day. I think I'm going to work out in the garden if it's not just a big muddy disaster, because as we know, a good portion of this country is wet. It's soaking wet because we have had these crazy floods, crazy storms coming through. I looked at the map the other day, and we had wet weather, flash flooding from Toronto at one point all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Just these big storms sweeping through. Good morning, Linda. Linda says the video makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to me too. We're going to talk about that for sure. But yeah, I wanted to go out in the garden this weekend, but I was lazy one day. And then the other day I went out and I was going to do something and then I had to leave. And then I came back and it was raining and pouring. And where my garden sits, if it rains very heavily, it ends up being under a couple inches of water. Then it's just a muddy disaster. And my garden, it's kind of, I don't know if I think it's a good thing, a positive thing more than it's a bad thing, but we're very, very low on the water table here. So the water table comes up just a few feet under the ground, which sounds crazy. But if you went out and to my garden and looked around right now, there's all kinds of these big holes. And I used to think they were snake holes. Then I found out they were actually like, there's many names for them: crawfish, crayfish, mud bugs, anything you can think of. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere in my garden. And it's kind of crazy because there must have been like a crawfish massacre that has taken place. I don't know what animals eat these crawfish things, but I was going through the garden one day and I'm sitting in the garden, like, making my way down, pulling weeds and things. And I kind of crawl around on my hands and knees to do it. And I came across this little tiny pile of all of these little, uh, their little claws. Like something had eaten them and taken all their little claws and piled them in a little pile. It was really strange. And I don't know what eats those little things, but something is eating them in my garden. But I try to plant around them. Sometimes they disrupt, but I've got those little holes everywhere. They're all over the backyard, all over the front yard. So the water table is very close to the ground and it worries me constantly, constantly fearful I'm going to step in a mud hole and end up down in some cavern of water somewhere. But I think it's good for the garden and good for the trees because I know those roots do stretch down into that water area. So I feel like things don't get quite as dry as maybe they would somewhere else. So that's kind of a positive. And of course, it's fall planting season. So I'm kind of working out what my garden's a disaster. I planted fall things in the spring. There's spring things I haven't planted yet. I didn't do a very good job figuring out the difference between fall planting and summer, spring planting. So things are all over, but I've got some really good tomatoes growing. So that's a good thing. And I'll tell you what, the way things are going right now in the world and all of the situation with the Epstein files, sending weapons to Ukraine, I am not kidding you. Every morning I wake up and I think, why am I doing this show talking about politics? Why am I frustrating myself? Some of my friends were posting on Facebook yesterday, oh, they're on vacation. I haven't taken a vacation since, I don't know, 2019. And they're posting rainbows and food they're eating. And I'm like, I can't even remember the last time I went to a restaurant. It's been so long. And I don't even usually see the light of day. And this summer, I have done absolutely nothing. I haven't even been outside hardly, other than to get in the garden just because I have to. And I'm like, why am I doing this? All of these people, and because friends like this, they're just going about their day, seemingly completely oblivious to everything that's going on in the news. And I'm like, wouldn't that be nice to be able to just get up in the morning and everything's rainbows and sunshine and you can go out and just hang out and have fun and do your thing and not have to worry about any of this stuff. Sometimes I really do wonder if that wouldn't be the better life for me. But if you're like me, it's like once there's no backtracking. Once your eyes have opened, there's no going back to being blissfully unaware, unfortunately. But I do envy those people. I would love for my life to be rainbows and sunshine and not have to worry about what's going on in the world, but it does affect us all. And I do worry about things, and especially now because we're living in such a crazy time. There's so much craziness going on. I'm sure you guys heard about that incident this weekend in Kentucky where there was, you haven't heard much on the media about this, at least not the truth. And there was a shooting that took place where a Kentucky state trooper was shot. And then the man who shot the Kentucky state trooper fled. He made his way into a church. And in that church, he opened fire. He shot 4 people in total, 2 of them being killed. In fact, I have their names here somewhere because it's important to talk about. 72-year-old Beverly Gum killed, 32-year-old Christina Combs killed, 2 Christian women attending church service killed. because a gunman fled into the church. And what they're not talking about is that the gunman was one of these free Palestine Muslims. He looks like a white man, but he's wearing his keffiyeh, which we see so often during these pro-Palestinian protests. And I showed a video last week in Florida where there was these people at a city council meeting and they were wearing the keffiyehs around their neck and on their heads. We see it at these various violent protests taking place across the country. Well, one of these lunatics, I still don't know and haven't heard yet what the original motive was. He shot again the Kentucky State Trooper who is recovering, and then shot 4 people at this church, 2 of those, of course, losing their lives. And no one talks about it. No one talks about it. And, my system, unfortunately, doesn't do a very good job allowing me to show you photos, or I would show you a photo of the suspect wearing his keffiyeh. So it makes you wonder, was the intent from the beginning to go to this church? It's not a normal thing that you get pulled over by police or you run into a police officer and you open fire on them. That doesn't happen very often. You know what I mean? Well, it does happen often, but it doesn't happen often. You know what I mean? And I keep thinking, was this intentional? Was he intentionally trying to attack a police officer? Was he intentionally making his way into a Christian church? Because these people, we know we are the enemy of these keffiyeh wearing Muslims or wannabe Muslims who are running around violently protesting in this country. But I thought it was pretty interesting that the media has said nothing about this guy. We know nothing. Just like, what was it, a few weeks ago, we had the shooter. Gosh, it's terrible. My brain is like blank right now, but we had the other shooter and no one ever said anything about it. It's still not been discussed on the media. It's like it's just a complete blackout when it comes to either trans people, perpetrating these crimes, or when it comes to Antifa type folks perpetrating these crimes, or in this case, a pro-Palestinian violent protester committing these crimes. You hear nothing. And Fred says, you should let me take you out to eat at a restaurant. Fred, I have no time to do anything, but I appreciate the sentiment. And I've got like 100 things I need to do today. Michelle says, good morning, fellow patriots. Good morning to you, Michelle. Good morning, Annette. Glesna, good morning, Glesna from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Happy to see you this morning. So think about that. Why aren't these things covered in the news? I think we know why. I think we know exactly why. And I'll tell you a very disturbing story I woke up to this morning. We got a lot of things to talk about, but this is the craziest thing I've heard in a long time. And I'm going to prepare you right now that it is a horrific story. It's very gruesome. I don't know if you guys have come across this story yet. It was the first thing I saw this morning, and I'm like, what in the world is happening? There are some really sick people in our country. And I'm going to show you the little news clip coming out of Victorville, California. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you seen this story yet? Oh, it's horrific. Now, the image here is blurred. I saw the unblurred image, and it is not good. What happened, I'll kind of tell you a little bit about it before I show you the clip. There were people who were coming in and out of a convenience store in Victorville, California, and somebody happened to notice, hey, there's a teddy bear on the ground here. But it wasn't a teddy bear. It was human remains shaped to form a teddy bear. I looked at this thing pretty closely, and it was not a real teddy bear. Some people were saying that it's human remains posted to a teddy bear or somehow attached to a teddy bear. I don't know. I saw it. It looked to me like it was human remains wrapped up with some type of a material to form a teddy bear shape. But it had male genitals. It had body parts. Instead of a teddy bear arms and legs, it had body parts. And instead of a teddy bear head, it had pieces of human face to make a teddy bear. I don't even know how to describe it. It's so bad. Hopefully video surveillance will reveal who left this there, but I'm going to show you the news clip because this is something straight out of the movies. It is one of the craziest stories I've heard in a very long time. Yes, Annette, it is absolutely morbid and disgusting. And to think there is someone in our society who did this. I mean, isn't this straight out of the movies? It is disgusting for sure. And how awful for whoever the victim or victims were.
New at 6, this is a story not for the faint of heart, rather. First, we want to warn you some of the details you might find disturbing. We've also blurred some of the graphic images from this as well. What you're looking at here is what San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies found at the AM/PM at Bear Valley and Amethyst Roads in Victorville today. Someone had reported finding an object that appeared to be covered in human remains. It is a teddy bear-shaped object. It was left on the ground right outside that convenience store. The coroner's office has picked up that item and is now investigating.
Yeah, a teddy bear-shaped object. A teddy bear-shaped object. Oh my gosh. I'm going to send that to one of my FBI friends later and be like, what do you make of this? Because he and I were just talking. I have a good friend in the FBI who's just a fantastic person, and we talk a lot about various cases. I never see the guy in person. He's off working. I'm off working. He's, has a family and is doing his wonderful thing for the FBI, serving the St. Louis area on one of these multi-jurisdictional task forces. But every once in a while we share cases, because I used to write a crime blog, and we were recently talking, and this is something everybody needs to be aware of. Everyone needs to be aware of this situation, and that is there are active serial killers here in our country. And the FBI did a report years ago that there were, at any given time, there were at least 50 serial killers running around the United States. Many of them, sorry guys, I know some of you drive trucks. Some of these truck drivers expected to be serial killers. I should say some of these serial killers expected to be truck drivers. I've talked about it before on various shows. Nothing against truck drivers, because trust me, there are serial killers amongst every profession, as we know. But we used to hear about the smiley face killer. I'm sure you guys are aware of that situation, where there were young men found in bodies of water with no obvious trauma or assault or anything else. They were just found drowned in a body of water, and they'd find a smiley face nearby. Well, people don't really talk about that too much anymore, but it's still happening. But that's not necessarily with the smiley face. There have been, gosh, I read a minimum of at least 39 young men found all across the United States in the same manner. And it's very consistent with some of the stories that you've heard. And I'm telling you about this because we all have maybe a son or a brother or nephews or other members of our family or people in our community that we should be concerned about. And it's a very, very common story. And that these young men are going into a bar or a restaurant. Somehow it's believed that they're being drugged. No one knows by who. It's never seen on video, but somehow they're being drugged. They leave, usually disoriented. They end up in a body of water. And it's interesting because these cases, of course, have been reviewed. They've had investigators go out to the restaurants or bars. These young men have visited. They have no video evidence. They have no idea who is doing this. And of course, everybody wants to say, well, it's just a coincidence, but it's being investigated that it's not a coincidence. It's perhaps either some people are saying one serial killer. I don't believe that. Back in the smiley face killer days, a lot of people were saying that it was part of a secret society, that there was an initiation process to where if you wanted to be initiated into the secret society, you had to go out, you had to drug a young man. And usually these are young men who are college students. They're young men who have really good jobs, but you have to go out, you have to drug these young men, and then you have to push them into a body of water. Now, whether that's a river or a lake, whatever it may be. So that was talk a long time ago, but it's awfully strange to me. If it's one, this is what my FBI friend and I were talking about. If it's one killer, then that means that killer has to be traveling all over the country, particularly in the East Coast, by the way, but it is happening everywhere. And most recently, it's been happening in Austin, Texas. So in Austin, Texas, they've had a number, I believe it was 13 young men have been found in bodies of water, 13. And in the same type of scenario where they've gone out, they've had drinks, they were disoriented, found later in a body of water. Now, some people want to say, oh, well, they just drank too much and they fell in. Well, I'm sure that's what these people, would want you to believe. So is it one person traveling around the country attacking these young men, or is it a group of people? Is it more than one person? I don't think any of us know. And, some people in the beginning wanted to say, well, maybe they were um, young men that were gay, but then that came out to be not true, that there really is nothing that ties these young men together other than, most of them are white. A lot of them are college students or, recent graduates or young men that have really good jobs. Those are the only things that seem to tie this together. And it's usually around party towns, Nashville, Austin, different areas across the East Coast. It's something though that I'm going to be looking into more. I'm probably going to talk about it more because think about this: it's being swept under the rug. People are not talking about it when it needs to be known. Because I think if I think in our society we always think of females as falling victim to these types of predators, and instead in this situation again it's young men, and I think a lot of young men go out in the evening and they don't think anything about it. They don't expect to be sexually assaulted. They don't expect, anything to happen to them. And yet that is absolutely not the truth. It certainly can. And men, just like women, need to be very aware of their beverages. We give these rules to women and we say, oh, what is there, a fingernail polish women can wear and stick their, we can stick our fingernail in the drink and the nail color, turns a different color if there's something in the drink, some type of GHB or something, but we don't have any warnings for men. So if you know a young man, please give them a warning and say, hey, yes, it typically happens to females, but it can happen to you as well. And please make sure these people, your family members, community members know to, just like females have to do, watch your drink when you're out because you just don't know. You just don't know what's around the corner. Jay says, Hannibal Lecter crap right there, talking about the teddy bear. Yes, it is. But I'll tell you, there's some crazy stuff going on in our country. It gets crazier by the day, doesn't it? So we'll talk a little bit more about these serial killer cases. I'm sure you guys heard about the female paddle boarder also on the East Coast, not related to the other story I was talking about, but also being investigated as a potential serial killer, which is just a crazy situation to me. Having written a crime blog, I find it all quite fascinating that we have these folks running around our country completely undetected. And so some of the other things, of course, I want to talk about today, Donald Trump's going to have a big announcement in regard to Russia. I think we all know or have a good idea what that announcement might be, or maybe I'm just guessing. I don't know. But there's a lot going on with Donald Trump right now. We're going to talk about the post he made in regard to the Epstein file, but more importantly, I think right now is the other the other side of this equation, and that is that we are going to once again be supplying Ukraine with weapons. Not only are we supplying them with Patriot defense systems, but now we're potentially going to be supplying them with long-range missiles. And our favorite warmonger, Lindsey Graham, is going to tell us all about it. And now I am not going to be bashing Trump today. It's kind of a quagmire when you're either a host of a show or a podcast, whatever it might be. There's certain things you just don't talk about. You just don't talk about, because if you do, people are always going to have it. It doesn't matter what side people are coming from. They're always going to take offense at it. There's just certain things you don't say. And so we're always kind of trying to work our way around, more delicate topics. And one of those is the bashing of Donald Trump. It used to be, you couldn't say certain words. You can't refer to certain religious groups, because if you do, then you're a hater. All of a sudden now with Donald Trump, we've got the same phenomena, taking place, where if you're critical of anything Donald Trump does, then you're not MAGA. You're not a conservative. You're not part of the group anymore. All of a sudden, you're not holding the line, and you're not trusting the process. Well, in my position, in the position of a lot of other people, when you're telling a story to be informational. I'm not bashing Donald Trump. I am trying to be informational. Do I like everything he's doing right now? 100% absolutely no. But before he was elected, I didn't like everything he did or everything he said. But guess what? I still went out and I fought really hard, to get him a win in the early vote. So it's okay to not like everything he does. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that he's done that many of us don't like. And, you just have to, good morning, Stacey. You just have to do it because you know what? It's news. It has to be discussed. And it also makes a great conversation pieces. Which side do you stand on? Because Trump, whether you believe it or not, is actually losing a lot of followers. Now, you can say those people are not real MAGA or real conservatives, whatever you want to say, but it's a fact that, of course, has to be discussed. And one of the situations going on that a lot of us don't like, including myself, is I don't want to give one single penny to Ukraine, not one penny, not because I don't support the people of Ukraine. I'm not a hater of the Ukrainians. It is because I don't support Zelensky. Why? Because he's a puppet. It's a puppet government in Ukraine. Number two, because we know that Ukraine is the hub of what? Human trafficking, organ harvesting. It is the cover up of the deep state. Isn't that right? And we've always said when Donald Trump became president, all of this would stop. We would stop funding Ukraine. It's not our war. We don't have anything to do what's going on over there. And you know what? It actually does not affect us. People say, oh, it does affect us. No, the situation between Russia and Ukraine does not affect us at all. There is no repercussions back to the United States. So, it's different than some of the other wars where we're trying to stop maybe an Islamic ideology or we're trying to stop cartels from coming into our country. That situation between Ukraine and Russia has nothing to do with us. It's not our fight. It's not our battle. And if you were going to try to tie it into something that has to do with us, you could say that we're empowering Russia, which is part of BRICS. So therefore, we're empowering BRICS. There's a lot of different routes you can go with that part. Jay says, no one, even Trump, can make everyone happy. If they do, run away. You're right, because people are human. Mary says, no one is ever going to like someone. Uh, and Dottie, I'm here and listening, hanging laundry and feeding the animals, and hopefully escaping some of the flooding you had there, Dottie. So I'm going to play this video of Lindsey Graham, and again, I am not bashing Trump, but Trump did just last week nominate, of course, put his name behind Lindsey Graham's re-election in 2026, which we talked about last week, and I don't even like to play this guy. I really don't, but we got to do it. So we're going to look at this really quick. And Jay says they want Ukraine's rare earth minerals. You're right, Jay. And we've already worked out a deal for rare earth minerals, and we're already over there getting those rare earth minerals. That's already a done deal. And I get it, but it doesn't mean that we have to supply them weapons. There are ways to get the rare earth minerals without giving Ukraine weapons. So let's take a look at our favorite warmonger here.
But the game regarding Putin's invasion of Russia is about to change. I expect in the coming days you will see weapons flowing at a record level to help Ukraine defend themselves. I expect in the coming days that there will be tariffs and sanctions available to President Trump he's never had before. I expect in the coming days more support from Europe regarding their efforts to help Ukraine. Putin made a miscalculation here. For 6 months, President Trump tried to entice Putin to the table. The attacks have gone up, not down. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest miscalculations Putin has made is to play Trump. And you just watch. In the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a massive effort to get Putin to the table. And to those who are helping him, China buying cheap Russian oil and having no accountability, those days are about over.
Okay, so we know that Trump said, Marco Rubio just went to Russia and met with Russian officials. And of course, I believe there's another meeting today that's going on. And I think ahead of that, now Donald Trump has a big announcement to make today in regards to the situation with Russia and Ukraine. And I think that's going to be the announcement that we're going to send joint surface-to-surface missiles to Ukraine. And those, if we do that, it's going to be a pretty big deal. And those missiles can reach Moscow from Ukraine. So I'm going to guess. Now, I don't know if that's what Donald Trump is going to say. I'm just guessing. And I'm going to show you a very short video here about these joint surface to surface missiles. You can take a look at this here.
Meets the AGM-158 Joint Air to Surface Standoff Missile can penetrate nearly any material of enemies.
Okay, so that's a very serious step on our part. It's one thing for us to supply Ukraine with Patriot defense systems or artillery or whatever, we've already been giving them. But, if Donald Trump decides to send these joint air surface to surface missiles, these missiles can reach Moscow from Ukraine. I think that's going to be a pretty big wake up call for Putin. And then we've got to ask, well, where do we go from there? Putin is not the person that backs down. He does not back down. And we've heard the stories before about what he does, backed into a corner. And I don't think we personally want to back Putin into a corner. I don't think that's good for us. There's so much talk these days about potential war, World War III, which, of course, the sky's not falling. I'm not fear mongering anyone. There's just a lot of talk back and forth in these back channels about going to war with China and with Russia, because now the story is that Donald Trump fears BRICS, not fears BRICS in the fact that they're trying to destabilize our dollar. And then, of course, we have Putin coming out saying, I'm not anti-American. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump and Putin have been friends. So I don't know what's going on here. But now all of a sudden, Putin's coming out and he's saying, I'm not anti-American. I am just pro-Russia. We've talked about this many times on this show, that Putin is actually Russia first, just like Donald Trump has or was America first. Well, Putin is Russia first. And we know, because we've talked about it so many times, that Russia doesn't care about sanctions. They are sanction proof. They have, as a matter of fact, I just read a story this morning that I really didn't even plan on talking about, where Russian companies are not even using the American dollar anymore. They don't need to, because they've built up the ruble to such a great level that they no longer need to use the central bank. Now, I think we all know what happens when a country decides they don't want to use the central bank anymore, or when they want to destabilize the dollar. We know that there was a recent BRICS meeting in which China's President Xi and, of course, Russia's Putin did not attend. Instead, they attended other functions. And, there's definitely something in the works. What that is, I don't know. But we've got to start thinking about, if Trump's announcement, or maybe he won't even announce it, maybe we'll just do it. If it's about these long-range missiles that can, again, strike Moscow from Ukraine, we're going to have to start thinking about, what is Putin going to do? I don't think he's going to react very favorably, because we've all heard that little undercover video that Donald Trump spoke to some donors, where he said he told Russia he would strike Moscow. He told, China's Xi that he would strike right in the middle of Beijing with the BOMBS if they didn't cooperate with us. So there's a lot of words being thrown around right now. But I will tell you, I don't know what you guys think, but I voted to end the support of sending these weapons to Ukraine, because we all know a lot of that money ends up in the pocket of Zelensky himself. The guy was a comedian playing piano with his genitals, and now all of a sudden he's worth what? Last time I heard, it was like $66 billion. It's probably a lot more than that right now. We know that those weapons end up in Ukraine and they end up on the black market. Now, we could easily say, well, Donald Trump isn't going to allow that to happen. He's going to make sure that those weapons are received, they're tagged, they're placed into service, and they don't end up on the black market. Now, I don't know how he can do that. Hopefully there is a way, but there's a lot of channels that once those weapons reach over into Ukraine, you just don't know where they're going to go. Now, I'm not too worried about a long-range missile ending up in the wrong hands, quite honestly, because, what are they going to launch it out of? But I do worry about some of the surface-to-air missiles that have disappeared. We've heard a lot of the weapons that we've sent to Ukraine ended up in the hands of terrorists, and then they, in turn around and take them across our southern border. So there's a lot of fear, that can go into us supplying weapons to Ukraine. But besides that, why are we doing this? Why are we rocking the boat? Why are we poking at Putin? I thought that this was going to end with Joe Biden. I really did. I don't see any good coming from this situation at all. Now, of course, there's probably a lot of things going on behind the scenes that I don't know, but we are going to hear Donald Trump make an announcement today at some point when it concerns Russia, of course, and Ukraine. Who knows? Maybe the big announcement is they've worked out a ceasefire plan. Maybe Donald Trump said, "Hey, we're going to send Ukraine these long-range missiles that can potentially reach Moscow if you don't agree to a ceasefire." So we will find out. And Jade, to your comment about the rare earth minerals, what's interesting and maybe not as interesting, maybe it was planned, is that the area that Russia has taken in Ukraine is where a good portion of those rare earth minerals are located. Now, there are still rare earth minerals across Ukraine and other areas as well, but the good majority of that is in that area that Russia has already taken. So the only thing I can think of is originally the peace deal was going to be that Russia could keep the area that they've already taken, but they are making record process. They are just flying through these different towns and gaining more traction, every day. Of course, Putin doesn't want to stop. He would love to have those rare earth minerals as well, right? So maybe that's what it was always about to begin with. We don't know. Something else I wanted to talk about besides Trump's big announcement today is I'm sure you guys saw, before we head out, we'll talk a little bit about the Fauci pardon. We're going to talk about a new FBI investigation as well about the weaponization of the DOJ and the FBI. But first, I want to talk about this about this statement that Donald Trump made. And again, I am not bashing Donald Trump. This is his statement. We're going to talk and we're going to break this down a little bit about what some of this means. It's kind of long, but I'll read through it kind of quickly. And I'm sure you guys have all read this already anyway. It says, "What's going on with my boys, and in some cases, gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it." So by selfish people, I'm assuming he means Bongino and Patel, is what I'm guessing. I don't know, but that's what I'm guessing. And it says let's see here. All over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. When he says never dies, is he alluding to the fact that a lot of people don't think he's alive, or is it to it never? I mean, a lot of people, think he is still alive, that there was really that he was taken off somewhere and is living his best life somewhere outside of jail or death. I don't know. Or does it possibly mean just that we just keep bringing it up so it never dies? And so it says, all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Yeah, because he's a pedophile. And why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more? They created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me. And now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Okay, so let's think about that. Let's think about that for a minute. He's telling us, there's a lot of different ways I guess you could take this, but the way I see it is that he's telling us that the files aren't real. Because he says, why are we giving publicity to the files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration? So is he saying that they created these files, that maybe there really were no cases of assault or pedophilia? Maybe the victims were coerced to come out against Jeffrey Epstein, but none of it's real? What is going on here? And Dottie said they did create the files to blackmail and control, possibly, but were there real victims, and is he truly a pedophile? Epstein, of course. I don't know. And then it goes on to say, of course, that his so-called friends are playing right into the hands. Is he again talking about Bongino and Patel because they're upset with Pam Bondi? I don't know. I mean, we've got to read between the lines. And then it goes on to say, why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, Why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files, no matter how much success we have had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons. It's never enough for some people. That's because we are told that there are hundreds or thousands of tapes, videotapes of Jeffrey Epstein and various men and women assaulting minors. That's why we don't give up, correct? That's why we don't give up. That's why we keep talking about it. And of course, unless you're telling us that that's not true, that it's all made up, then that's a different story. And no, but otherwise, no, it's not enough for us. And let's see here. No matter how much success we have had, oh, wait, we already read all that. It's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any administration has achieved in over 100 years. True, but we're also backtracking in some areas. And we have so much to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left imploding the left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election, also true of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. That can speak for itself. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2000 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried the same thing in 2024. That's what she's looking into as Attorney General and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Well, I will tell you what. I'll tell you what. Donald Trump posted that post on True Social. And I'm sorry, that was really long for me to read that, but he posted on True Social. There were 45,000 comments. 99.9% of those comments bashed Donald Trump for making these statements. And I think sometimes it's the words that he uses because it dismisses all of our feelings about pedophilia, right? That is one of our primary topics was we wanted to get rid of pedophilia. We wanted to see the people who harmed these children to be prosecuted and at the very least investigated. Dottie says Epstein was mentioned quite a few times in Trump's post. Was he telling us to not forget? I don't think there's any hidden message there, Dottie. I could be wrong. I don't think there's any hidden message in that post. I think it was very clear where he's telling us, move along. The files aren't real. It was made up by Hillary, Obama, Biden, Comey, Brennan. Maybe that's why Comey and Brennan are under investigation now, because we've not really heard a lot of reasons why they're under investigation. And Allison, good morning, Allison. I would like to see every pedophile arrested in America. I am also very concerned about the invasion of radical Muslims, the invasion of our country. And, Allison, those are probably two of the bigger topics that we should be all talking about, and we do talk about on the show, of course, quite a bit, is pedophilia in America and the invasion, of course, that's coming in that people don't even talk about it. When Colonel Joe Adams joins the show, that is something he talks about fairly often. Dottie says, blonde is not at the top of the food chain. They all take their orders. They do. They all take their orders. Mr. Parnot, talk about propaganda trying to deflect attention from what he promised on the campaign trail. Yeah. And it's more about the fact that we've been waiting for these prosecutions to occur, or at least an investigation to begin, than it even is that he promised us on the campaign trail. There's a couple of different things that were promised that we're not seeing. Ending, of course, weapons and funding to Ukraine. That's another promise that's been broken to us. And I'm sure there will be more. And you know what? We tend to focus on the bad things. I made a post on Facebook this weekend talking about all the good things. There are far more good things that Donald Trump has done for this country. He is far better than Joe Biden, far better than, of course, Clinton, Obama. You could go down the line. Certainly far better than Kamala Harris would have been. We're seeing a lot of great things happen, which is what he's talking about in the post. So are we supposed to just take the good and say, okay, we're just going to look the other way? We're not going to worry about what's going on with Epstein. We're not going to worry about it. Or if you guys were here at the very beginning of the show, I played a video by Anonymous. There's a lot of anonymous people. There's no one anonymous. And they were talking about, there is a plan. And, is there a plan? I don't feel like there's a plan, quite honestly. I feel like that Donald Trump is telling us very, pointedly that, hey, these files were made up. They were fabricated by leftists. I don't understand how that connects because they never use those files against Donald Trump. And they never use those files against Republicans. So I'm not really sure where he's coming from there, or if there's something maybe we don't know. I'm not going to play the video. I didn't queue it up, but there is a video circulating out there about Donald Trump's connections to Epstein. Now, Donald Trump banned Epstein from coming into Mar-a-Lago. I don't think he would have done that if he was such a big fan of Epstein. So I don't think that Donald Trump's name is in that list. I don't think Donald Trump assaulted any minors or was involved in any type of trafficking. I truly don't. And let's see here. And Lori says, I personally wish he wouldn't use statements like, we are the hottest, best country ever. That's not true, and it sounds ridiculous. Well, his entire post sounded ridiculous to me, and it sounded like he's telling his followers, hey, just forget it. Sweep it under the rug. Move along, because we're not talking about it anymore. But I would love to know how Obama, Hillary Clinton, Comey, Brennan, etc., created these files and why they are just as fake as the Russia hoax, the Steele dossier. I would like to know how they are as fake as that. So are we to believe that there really are no videotapes of Epstein or any of his associates assaulting women, whether that's minors or adult women being assaulted? I don't know. Jim, good morning. Jim says the mystery is over. Time for action. Allison, look at England. 70% of the mayors are Muslim, 300 mosques, 150 Sharia law courts. It's heading here. It's already happening here, Allison. We've talked about this. I don't know if it was last week or the week before. We've talked about it quite a few times where Sharia law in this country should be banned. It absolutely should be banned. There's no place in our country where we already have a judicial system for Sharia law. I believe that keffiyehs should be banned. I believe that burqas should be banned. I don't think that head coverings, even though it is a religious sentiment, should be used in the United States. If you're here in the United States, we are a Christian country. We're based in Christianity, and those types of ideology, they don't belong here. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone. It does not belong here. And Jay says, these anonymous videos and statements are garbage. Yeah, Jay, probably. Because like I said, I could put on an anonymous mask and a black background behind me, and I could say all kinds of stuff. And you know what? It doesn't mean anything different than what you have to say, or Allison has to say, or Dottie, or Jim, or anybody else has to say. Any of us could be anonymous. It means absolutely nothing. Just another theory that's out there. There is no anonymous that has secret government information, unfortunately. I wish there were. I really do wish there were. But take that statement from Donald Trump as you want. But I will tell you, some of the comments where he was getting, let's see, I don't know if I still have this queued up. I did earlier. They were pretty harsh. But, but truthful. People are upset. People are upset. And I don't think that there's anything we can do about that. Here's a comment by Chrissy. Well, why did Pam string us along with Bindergate, calling it phase 1? Then she went on Fox and said the files are on her desk. Then it was that they were in the Southern District of New York. Then it was her telling a nanny at lunch there are tens of thousands of child porn. Then it was a presser. Then it was a doctored prison video. And that video, by the way, was proved to be fake. By the way, parts of the video fake that we all saw that said no one came in to Epstein's cell, which, by the way, the doors that you see in that video, that's not even Epstein's cell. Those are that door that said number 46. That's not Epstein's room. Epstein's room was on the floor below, way off in the corner to the right. You cannot see it on that video. So I would think that there's a video of Epstein's cell, because such a high profile client, don't you think they'd want a video of his cell? But that's not the video that we've been shown, of course. And so there, people went on, you promised us, sir, putting MAGA base down is not going to make this go away. Pam Bondi has lied to us time and time again. Who is advising you? Not a good decision. I'm worried about how Epstein died or if it was a government he worked for and he did the deed. I care about the world leaders and billionaires getting away with their crimes. Teresa says, respectfully, President Trump, your base demands the release of the files, all of them. If another country was involved, we need to know. This is not going to go away. Your base is not going to get railroaded over this again. So I could go on. There's 45,000 comments that are all very similar to that. And Jason Saunders says, Maxwell should probably appeal. Well, here you go, Jay. She already did appeal. In fact, her appeal is to be decided on by what? July 14th. What day? Today's July 14th. Imagine that. Imagine that. Her appeal is to be decided today. What do you think about that? And Maxwell has been very forthcoming in the past couple days through her attorney saying, hey, I want to testify in front of Congress. For whatever reason, Republicans say, nope, we don't want your testimony. And I have no idea why Republicans would block Maxwell from testifying in front of Congress. Maxwell has said that she would like to reveal the list. She would like to discuss the names. Now, what that means, I don't know. We know she does know who the names are. But no, as of right now, her appeals, to Congress, of course, are nope, we don't want to hear your testimony. But her appeal in the court of law, of course, going before the Supreme Court, that is today. We'll see what happens. They said that the Department of Justice already extended her appeal once. So it's up to Pam Bondi today if that appeal is heard or if it is extended once again. So that's something to watch today. Good morning, Scott. Jim, if Trump is going to drop this issue, he needs to take some strong action in other issues. I think he's trying to take some strong action in other issues. We're doing some really fantastic things in this country, just like Tom Homan said the other day. The media is completely ignoring the fact that there are 300,000 children missing in this country, and they have recovered over 10,000 of those children, but it's not being heard in the media. Okay, but to me, you can do the absolute best things for this country. Let's just say we took gas prices down to $1. Let's say food was free. We're just going to go off the ropes here. We're going to say no tax for anybody. It still doesn't take away from the fact that there are pedophiles in this country, and not just pedophiles, but rapists, people who are committing sexual assault against these women who Jeffrey Epstein and allegedly, Ghislaine Maxwell lured into his various homes and his island. And we cannot just sweep that under the rug. It doesn't matter that all of these other fantastic things are happening. We can't just sweep that under the rug. And I think that the Trump administration is going to just have to either lie really well, they're going to have to tell us the truth, or they're going to have to create such a false flag that we are all worried about something else and not even thinking about the Epstein files anymore. Because I'll tell you what, none of us are going to just let it go. Not going to happen. And Glenn says, is Epstein still alive? I think he is. I do think he is. In fact, I'm not going to reveal any names, but I got a message from someone yesterday who lives. Remember when Maxwell was arrested? She was finally found at a friend's house on the East Coast in Massachusetts. And that's where she'd been hiding out. They finally located her. Well, I know somebody who lives right by that house. And this person messaged me last night. They're like, I don't think Maxwell's in jail. Now, I know there's ways to prove she's in jail, so I don't know how, the situation is. But we don't hear a lot about Maxwell, about her jail time. But this person said, we were driving by that house and we saw somebody that looked exactly like Maxwell, walking out in front of the house. And they're like, I'm pretty sure it was her. So I don't know. I don't have any way to prove or disprove that. Does she get breaks? She's in a minimum security prison. So it is possible that while on appeal, she's been able to leave. I don't know the situation. And Adrian, totally agree. Nancy, good morning. Monday. Yes, it is. Jay Saunders, Bill Clinton, royal family, etc. Oh, I am sure they're on the list. As a matter of fact, of course, as we said last week, the investigation into Prince Andrews has been dropped. All cases related to the Epstein files have been dismissed. No one is being investigated any longer with the Epstein files. And let's see. Jay says Bondi isn't doing anything she was told to do. Well, she's doing exactly what she was told to do by Donald Trump, of course. Now, what I want to talk about also before we, move on to a couple other things is that this back and forth. I'm thinking that in this post that Donald Trump made, I'm going to just read this one little part again. He says, "What's going on with my boys?" And in some cases, gals. They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. Okay, so who's he talking about? Is he talking about Patel and Bongino? There were a lot of rumors this past few days that Bongino was upset with Bondi and he took a couple days off to think about whether or not he truly wanted to be in this administration. And allegedly, he's done that once before, took a couple days because he was upset about something and really thinking about his decisions. Kash Patel, a lot of rumors that Kash Patel also was considering resigning over the Epstein file situation. Now, what's interesting about that is that we hear all of these rumors that these two are thinking about stepping away. And then we see this post by Donald Trump, who says, again, what's going on with my boys? So we have to assume he's talking about Patel and Bongino. Then all of a sudden, Kash Patel releases a statement that says, none of that's true. I think I have that here. What he said, do I or don't I? No, I don't. But yeah, I do. He says, here's what Kash Patel released. He said the conspiracy theories just aren't true, never have been. It's an honor to serve the president of the United States, and I'll continue to do so for as long as he calls on me. So what I want to know is did Donald Trump just make this statement because he also heard the rumors? Or did he contact Patel and Bongino and said, hey, what's going on? I would think that as the president of the United States, if I heard these rumors about Bongino and Patel, I would be on the phone being like, hey, what's up? You're part of my administration. I know you're upset. This isn't maybe the way you thought things would go. However, I'm hearing that you're wanting to leave. And they say, oh, no, we're not going anywhere. Then there would be no reason for Donald Trump to make this post. No reason. Now, if it were true and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were actually thinking about leaving, then that would be a reason for Donald Trump to make this very public statement admonishing them. And then what really frustrates me is that, and I like Kash Patel a lot, is that he calls it conspiracy theories. Now, isn't that the way that we used to say that the leftists tried to intimidate us, as they would call us conspiracy theorists? That was an intimidation tactic. I feel like we're getting a lot of intimidation tactics coming from our own party, a lot of gaslighting coming from our own party. Congress, other than Marjorie Taylor Greene, is completely silent. Completely silent. Have you heard any members of Congress speaking up about this whole Epstein deal or the funding of weapons to Ukraine? They are silent. No one is going to speak out against Donald Trump. They are completely silent. Other than Thomas Massie, of course, we all know that he is no longer going to be running for election because of this situation. Lori says, have there been victims of the Epstein Island come forward? I truly don't know. Have they silenced these victims with P. Diddy? They had dozens of victims come forward. Yeah, Lori, there are many, many victims that have come forward from Epstein Island, from his townhouse in New York City, from all these different places. I've read over those victim statements, and there's probably ones we don't even know. But more importantly, we know there's video evidence. We know those videos exist, or is it all just a lie? We heard, originally Pam Bondi said there were lots of videos of children, remember, being assaulted, but then she backtracked and said, well, that was just Jeffrey Epstein watching child porn. That's all those videos were. There was nothing in there about anyone else. He didn't have any videos of any person of note. There was nothing. It was just him watching child porn. So I feel like we're being gaslighted. I don't know what you guys think. I don't blame Trump. I know there's something going on behind the scenes that none of us understand, and hopefully someday we will. I know there are far more great things happening than, negative. But at the same time, when we're in a situation where, yes, and Glenn, thank you for that. John Solomon confirmed the spat and Bongino taking time off. Absolutely so. But then they want to come out and say, nope, didn't happen. All is good. All is good. We're just being gaslighted. And Mr. Parnot replying to Lori, yes, many have come out and they keep dying in odd ways, of course. It's called unalived. I can't say that word, Mr. Parnot. But yeah, there's been a lot of, and that's why I think this situation with Epstein is so upsetting to so many of us, because we've been told all this time, even including under Donald Trump's past term, that Epstein is this horrific person. We have countless stories. One of those stories, Lori, of witnesses coming forward, victims, was a couple of girls. I read their stories pretty intensely, and they were at a camp for disadvantaged youth. And that's what I think upsets me more, is the type of people that were taken advantage of. These girls were at a camp for disadvantaged youth. They were funded to go to this camp through Jeffrey Epstein. And what had happened is these girls, I don't know how they came across, I can't recall how they came across Maxwell, but somehow Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, somehow Maxwell saw these girls and must have thought, oh, that would be, Epstein's type. I don't know. Which he tended to prey on disadvantaged youth. So Maxwell approached the families of these two girls and said, hey, we will pay for your daughters to attend this camp. It's a really great camp. They'll learn a lot. And I've heard that there was, cash payments made to the families and some other things. So the families, unassuming, not understanding what was going to happen to their daughters, sent these daughters to camp. And what ended up happening at this camp is one of the girls' witness testimonies was that she was sitting on the beach, hanging out. And, I think she was like 14. And then here comes Epstein strolling along the beach and sees this girl and, of course, offers her. And I think this is when the payments came into the parents, a trip to Epstein Island, taking her under his wings. And of course, she, of course, said not only was she sexually assaulted at the age of 14, but her other, she saw other sexual assaults taking place. So if you ever go through and look at the testimony, there's a lot of testimony. So for us to believe that these Epstein files are not real, then we're going to have to believe that all of these victims were coerced into making these witness statements. Now we're going to have to believe that Maxwell was charged on charges of what? Trafficking to who? To no one? And then her appeal, of course, is today. The deadline for her appeal is today. So does that mean that, or are we going to see the charges dropped against her? Who did she traffic people to? Apparently no one. So we'll see. I would think it would be pretty interesting. I would love to hear what Maxwell has to say, quite honestly. I have a feeling that she's going to be the next one unalived, because I can guarantee you there are people out there now that she's speaking out. Think about that. She's been silent this entire time. She hasn't said a word. Silence. Now, all of a sudden, she's speaking out and said she wants to give the names of the men and women involved with Epstein. She wants to give those names. She wants to testify in front of Congress. We'll see what happens. I hope her head is on a swivel because that's probably where it needs to be. So that's a pretty serious situation unfolding. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. Glenn, flight logs. Yeah, a lot of us have seen the flight logs. We have a good idea who was flying back and forth. But I'll tell you what, I don't appreciate our own party, the people we voted for, turning the tables around on us and calling us conspiracy theorists, because both Donald Trump called us conspiracy theorists, as did Patel and some other folks, because we think these Epstein files are real and because we thought Patel and Bongino stepped back a little bit from the administration over these files. And, I've always said it, being a politician would be tough because you have to do what the president tells you to do. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. If you want to continue on in the administration, you want to keep your job, you do what the president tells you to do. You're serving a purpose. And whether or not you agree with what the president tells you to do doesn't really matter. You either resign or you agree. And as we've said, with Congress being so silent, I think we all know what's going on. Something else in the news today, we're not going to talk about this very much. Fauci talking about the auto pen at 10:30 at night. Now, apparently, there was a call that came into the White House at 10:30 at night to allow the auto pen to sign off on Fauci's pardon. Here's the story. It says this took place on January 19th. January 19th, think about that. The night before the inauguration. It says at the January 19th meeting, which took place in the yellow Oval Room of the White House residence, Mr. Biden kept his aides until nearly 10 p.m. to talk through these decisions, according to, of course, a witness that shall apparently remain silenced. And so the way that it goes is that they were in this meeting the night before the inauguration. Joe Biden gave the okay to pardon Fauci. A call was made into, I think his name is Mr. Zients, Jeff Zients, Zients, who is one of the White House aides, saying, oh, Biden agreed to use the auto pen for this signature. So if Biden was there, if he was having a meeting, why couldn't he sign off on it himself? I will see. I have a feeling a lot of these pardons are going to be overturned, and especially now, because we know Donald Trump, one of the things, I don't know if he's going to talk about this today. I know he's got a lot of announcements to make, is that the FBI just opened an investigation. It's called, they're calling it the Grand Conspiracy Probe, the Grand Conspiracy Probe. And as Donald Trump mentioned, in fact, in this Truth Social post he made, I'm going to go back and talk about this for 1 second. Some of the things that he wants to talk about is just this: the laptop from hell, of course, we know what that is, the Russia hoax, Russiagate, as some of us have called it, the Hillary Clinton files, how she deleted all those emails, the Steele dossier. Well, all of these things that Donald Trump called out in this Truth post are some of the things that we're going to be investigating. So the FBI is launching, or has launched, an investigation to all of these things. They're going back and they're going to talk about Hillary Clinton and how she deleted those 35,000 emails. Remember that? How she had the server at her home versus, which of course she was not ever supposed to have. How she bleached, what they call it, bleach bit back in the day, all of her devices, a lot of those devices disappearing. And Donald Trump feels that the administration just turned the other way, that these are crimes that should have been looked at. And so he is just, I think it's kind of funny after all these years. And I don't, if this is supposed to be like that moment where we all say, oh, forget the Epstein files, we're going back to investigate Hillary Clinton, or we're going to go back and look at the Russia hoax, we're going to go back and look at Hunter's laptop, we're going to go back and look at those 51 intelligence agencies who all claimed that Donald Trump was in fact part of this Russia hoax. Now, the FBI is going to be investigating these things. And I don't think that's enough. Is that enough to distract you from everything that's going on? It's not enough for me. And then I think, what are they going to do? What kind of false flag can they create? And it's crazy to even think that the Trump administration would need to create a false flag to distract us away from these Epstein files. But I do think it's necessary, because we're not going to forget. So what can they do to make us forget? Some people said, bring out the aliens. I'm going to show you an alien video, which is kind of interesting, just resurfaced yesterday after all this time. And Mr. Parnell, everything in the past, it's okay for the past when it pertains to him, but not what matters to the people. Yeah, there are some things that the people are just not going to forget about. Those Epstein files, of course, being one of those big things. We're not going to overlook it. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We're not going to forget. So the next step is the distraction. What's going to happen? Is it going to be war with Russia or China? Somebody said aliens, and I'm kind of joking when I show this to you, but yet it is also important to see. And usually I would show this on a Friday, but somebody was posting this out there thinking maybe we need to just go back and start talking about UFOs and aliens, and that would distract all the people. Now, do you guys recall, and I know this is a huge shift, but do you guys recall back, I don't remember when this was, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was that family in Las Vegas. I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. There was that family in Las Vegas. And the story started out where there was a police officer in Las Vegas giving somebody a citation. And you could see in his camera, body cam, something green like floating down to the earth. And then you hear this boom where it crashes. And then that officer ends up getting a call from a family. And it was a young man who said, hey, and I'll show you the 911 call here in just a second. And these people happen to have a camera. Now, you can call me crazy. That's okay. It's not my video. I didn't do it. But the family, and they've given several interviews. They were quiet for a long time. Then they came back out and started giving interviews. What's interesting about this UFO case, to me, it's one of the most interesting I've ever seen. And that is because they have actual camera footage. Most of the time you don't have camera footage. And apparently they didn't get to the camera footage. Now, the family claims that they were just hanging out, typical night in Las Vegas. They heard a big boom. They look out their back door, and sure enough, there's an alien out there, 2 aliens, I believe. And you can hear the 911 call for yourself and see the video for yourself. And then the police officer comes out and he's like, I saw that. It was on my, I was giving a citation and I saw that come down. And then the family gives their account. They show where it happened. You can see this big space in the middle of their backyard where it appeared something crashed. Where that thing went, nobody knows. And I don't know why I always lose my headset at the end of the show. I think it just works its way out. I've got strange tiny ears, so it doesn't hold very good. But I'm going to show you guys this video really quick since it's kind of the end of the show anyway. And we'll talk about this for a second.
There's like an 8-foot person beside it, and another one's inside, and it has big eyes and looking at us, and it's still there.
Okay, where is this on your property?
In my backyard. I swear to God, this is not a joke. This is actually, we terrified of it.
So there's 2 people or 2 subjects that are in your backyard?
Correct, and they're very large. They're like 8 foot. 9 feet, 10 foot, I don't know. They look like aliens to us. Big eyes, they have big eyes, like I can explain it, and big mouth. They're shiny eyes, and they're not human. They're 100% they're not human.
Okay.
So that creature is what we are told. You can kind of see it there. I'll leave that there for just a second. And that we're told that that is the alien that crashed in the backyard and that there were 2 of them. And whether that's true, whether it's not, that's what we're told. This is allegedly real video from that family. Larry says there's no such thing as aliens. What people are seeing are fallen angels. A lot of people did say that, Larry. A lot of people think they're demons. But what we're seeing here is a real video, according to the family. And you didn't hear anything from this family for quite a while. But it was interesting. It's probably one of the most documented of alien UFO stories there are, because numerous people in the neighborhood saw it. I don't know if you guys remember that. Numerous people saw it. What I don't have for you, and I don't even know if I can find it, it's probably been deleted from the internet, is that after this family recorded this video, after they saw these alleged aliens in their yard, there were other calls that came through in that neighborhood where someone else saw these same beings, which is what's really interesting. And of course, the police officer investigating, having seen that green item crash from the sky, we'll have to show that. I'll have to pull that video back up another time. And a lot of witnesses, a lot of neighbors also saw the green object fall. A lot of neighborhoods heard the boom. People in the neighborhood, they all came over. They all saw the same thing. So it's not, like one person saw it. Nobody can prove it. Several people saw these beings. Several 911 calls came in, not only relating to the crash itself, but seeing these beings in other people's yards. It's a pretty crazy story. And so then you got to think about, remember Senator Kennedy? Remember when we had the Chinese balloon, going through the United States, and all of a sudden there was all these objects, all around the place. Remember that? Nobody ever talks about it anymore, but there were all these different objects. And people said, are they weather balloons? What are they? And they shot one down over Alaska. Do you remember that? Over the Yukon, actually. And so they were going out trying to recover this object. It was like a glass sphere is what they were described as. And Senator Kennedy, man, I'm going to have to find that video. Senator Kennedy made one of the most ominous statements I think I've ever heard a senator make. And he said, yes, we shot this down. If you're an American, I would be very fearful because there's something out there. And he didn't say it in those exact words. I'll have to find it. And Winston, good morning. Fallen angels and also demons appearing. It does make you wonder, what's going on. And if we're going to be distracted away from the Epstein case, maybe it'll be the aliens, because Donald Trump has the ability to tell us, is it true? Excuse me. Are there really aliens? Is there really life in outer space? Elon Musk says no, there's not. He's been up there. He's not seen a darn thing. But what is really the truth? I don't want to say I would exchange the Epstein case for the truth on aliens, excuse me, because we don't want to give up on the victims, of course, of any type of sexual abuse. But I think that could be one way Donald Trump could go. He could say, hey, we'll tell you what's really going on with the UFOs and the aliens, and let's just forget about Epstein. Let's just let all that go. I'm kind of kidding because I don't see that happening. But I do think that's such a fascinating case with that particular UFO alien sighting, that it's the first time we've ever had video of what somebody says they saw when it comes to. Now, the problem is most people don't know about it. Most people don't believe it. Because I've always said, if the truth was ever revealed to us, 100% the truth, most people would never even know a good percentage of Americans don't pay attention to the news. They don't have the faintest clue what's going on with the White House, the Epstein files, the weather. They don't know about these record flooding taking place all across the country. What has it been? A dozen or more record 1,000-year floods all taking place across our country, and people talking about these camps in Texas that are for the elites, mostly Christian elites. And I've been looking into that too. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I have been looking into Camp Mystic. A friend of mine actually was a camp nurse at Camp Mystic, and hasn't said anything revealing about anything that was going on there. But it is kind of interesting. Every time I turn around, there's a very high profile person saying, "Oh, my child went to that camp," or my daughter, Dennis Quaid, saying that his daughter actually was a camp counselor this year. I think her name was Zoe, but she was just a little bit north of Camp Mystic. So I have never heard of these camps along the Guadalupe River. I have never heard about elites sending their kids, apparently $5,000 to $10,000 per week for some of these camps. I had never heard about any of this. Have you? It is all new to me. I don't want to jump too far into the rabbit hole with what's going on at these camps, or whether or not there was, cloud seeding and this all happened with intent. I don't know, because there was a lot of lives lost, 27 lost at Camp Mystic, just Camp Mystic. So, and of course, I think there's 183 people still missing from what I understand. I know they found a lot of people this weekend, so that number has probably gone down, but it is pretty scary. And when you think about the flooding, the Guadalupe River, I think, has flooded 3 times now since July 4th. Not only that, but several other rivers as well. Last night, there were rescues taking place from fresh flash floods. On Saturday, rescues taking place from flash floods. It's a pretty crazy situation, and I don't really have an answer for what's going on. Probably weather manipulation, I would guess. I'm not going to say it's not, because it probably is. I don't think we're going to have storms from Toronto all the way down to the Gulf Coast producing all of these torrential downpours if it's not. I was driving yesterday during the rain as it came through my area, and roads were flooding. I could see water standing on each side of the road. And I'm like, probably after I passed through there, those roads were probably closed off from flooding. There's something going on. We'll see how that plays out, over the coming days and weeks. If the flooding continues, we might have to start thinking about where else is it going to strike next, where eventually the ground becomes saturated over a large area, and then we're going to have some flooding that maybe we would have never expected. So we'll see. All right, guys. Well, that's it for me today. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. A lot more to talk about. We'll await Donald Trump's big announcement today. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Keep an eye on that situation. If you guys didn't join me at the beginning of the show, we talked about a teddy bear that was found in Victorville, California, at a convenience store made out of human remains. It was one of the creepiest, craziest stories I've maybe ever come across. So we're going to keep an eye out from that. Hopefully investigators will be able to find video of who left that human bear there. Seriously, crazy, crazy stories. We'll pick that up tomorrow. We'll see what happens. We'll wait. It'll be a daily wait to see what the big distraction is, but I can guarantee you something is coming. Something is coming to take our minds off this Epstein case, because Donald Trump, he was very serious. I do not think he's going to backtrack on that Epstein case. I think that he's telling us and his administration that it's over. We're not talking about it anymore. It's over. All discussions are over. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll wait. We'll see what that big distraction is, but it's coming. All right, guys, I hope you all have a great day. I am heading out probably to the garden to do some weeding, and I will see you all tomorrow. And again, I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Have a good day, everyone.